Okay, so this is take 2 on the introduction because I actually forgot to plug the microphone into my iPad. So we have another video to look at here that is a cultural differences video. If you saw my last video, it was a couple from somewhere in the UK, probably England, who talked about the cultural differences that they noticed when they came to Australia. And we have another one. I think she's also from England, and she's titled hers Weird, Wild and Wonderful Cultural Differences. She looks at a few different things to what this other couple looked at, so I thought it was interesting to look at them back to back. This is a new creator that I've not looked at very much. Her name is Lottie Clack, and she currently has 836 subscribers. So I will, of course, link her video in the description section, and I will also provide the link for her channel. So you can click on that and hop over and subscribe if you like what you see. And speaking of subscribing, I'm just going to say this up the front of my video. If you like my content and you're keen to see more, please subscribe. And if you do subscribe, click on the bell notification so you can be notified anytime there are new videos being released. As mentioned in my previous video, I'm at this point in time aiming to get 2 videos out a week. I know that's fewer than what I've previously achieved, but as I ease my way back into trying to maintain 2 channels after a broken shoulder, I think that way I'm putting less pressure on myself. I also happen to have a new pup who seems to take up quite a lot of my extra time, which of course cuts into recording time, which I certainly don't begrudge him of that because he is very cute. So without further ado, let's just jump in and have a look at these weird, wild and wonderful cultural differences.
As Australia is an English-speaking country with a lot of similarities to the UK, I think that British people are often very surprised when they come here and find that there are more cultural differences than you'd expect. Hey, I'm Lottie, a half Brit, half Aussie who moved to Sydney last year, and in today's video we're breaking down all the cultural differences that I've noticed since living here, from the mysterious VIP lounges that you might notice advertised here, to the strict drinking laws and, quite frankly, really aggressive driving.
You're an absolute...
Yeah, good one. Thanks, Lottie. I've just spent 2 days fighting demonetisation of videos on my other channel. Basically lost 2 days worth of income for who knows what reason, and within the first 4 minutes of this video I get 2 lots of swearing which I have to delete. Otherwise this video will be demonetised also. That said, I don't think really the views on this channel really make it that significant if these videos are demonetised. This is just sort of my relaxation channel. I'd love to see it grow, but you've seen I haven't put the most brilliant effort into it, so at the moment it's not exactly a cash cow.
Mate.
This video could help you decide if you do want to move here or not. So without further ado, let's get into them. Let's start off with the Aussie pub. In the UK, the English pub is such a huge staple of people's lives. Like, it's where you go down to have a drink with your mates, it's where you pop out to have a Sunday roast with your family, it's where you might watch some sports, it's where you go out for like a cozy little drink on a winter's night, dim lighting, slightly sticky tables and worn out stools. There's something very comforting about the pub to British people, and I think it really is our second home away from home. But in Australia, sure, they have things they call pubs, but they're not really pubs. Like, they're not really British pubs. They're what I would refer to more so as sports bars. Yeah, I said it. They really remind me of, and kind of like, not in a snobby way, this is just from my experience, but of those pubs that you have abroad in Europe on holiday as a British tourist in places like Ibiza or some other places I went to in Greece, which are more commonly kind of party places, they generally give off a really big sports and gambling vibe, if I can say that.
Yeah, mate, the Aussie pub. A weird House of Mirrors style building where instead of mirrors being mounted in every possible direction, it's 75-inch LCD TV screens playing 4 different CGI horse races at once. I've only got 2 eyes, mate. What the f*** I need 4 different angles of the same fake horse race for?
They have the big TV screens playing sports and loads of these pokey machines, as they're called here. I think we'd probably call them slot machines back in the UK. And having these pokey machines is so common, in fact, that although Australia has 0.33% of the world's population, it has a fifth of the world's pokey machines due to Australia's bigger gambling culture, which I'm going to discuss later in this video.
So I think we can be fairly confident that her experience of Australian pubs is based on inner city pubs, in which case you probably do have these more modern looking pubs with the really ordinary square tables and the screens everywhere with horse races and keno and all that sort of stuff, and pokies in the other room. But my experience as someone who lived in a regional area for 20-something years, my experience of Aussie pubs is your country pubs, which are so much like British pubs. What she showed at the beginning as the British pub is, it looks so much like the local pub in the town where I used to live. They didn't have pokies, you know, these smaller pubs that are basically owned by a family, sole trader, that sort of thing. They're not the same as these big pokey pubs that are owned by a company. Because at the end of the day, that's the difference. You've got these big upmarket pubs that are owned by a company. You know, they probably own 4 or 5 of these, and they've packed them with pokies because they've got the money to do so, pay the licensing, buy the pokies, all that sort of thing. And then you have got your traditional country pubs, which look exactly like what she's saying the English pubs are. So she probably needs to get out of Sydney a little bit and start checking out a few country towns. I mean, I think the pub at Sunbury may have pokies. I've only been in the dining area there, but you go in the dining area there and it looks just like, you know, not so much, but it looks a lot like your classic British pub. Like I said, several pubs down in Tasmania, in the country areas, you walk in and you will think you have been transported back to the UK. I can't say a lot for Victorian pubs because it's just not the culture that I'm into these days. I prefer a quiet drink at home, particularly given that you get so many morons out on the roads at night. Even if you are the responsible person who stays under the limit, you don't know if there are going to be other people on the road who are over the limit. Something I learnt back when I was still living in Tassie, and I'd go and hang out at a friend's place on Friday nights, and I had to time my drive home to avoid heading home at the same time as the pub closing, because otherwise there would be cars coming from the other direction where people were probably over the limit, taking the back road home, thinking that it was okay because they wouldn't get booked, not thinking about other people on the road.
Just when it comes to alcohol, it's not just the venues that you drink in that are different, but also the laws. So did you know that drinking in public places in Australia, I'm thinking parks, beaches, can actually land you with pretty hefty fines? which is completely different to the UK where you can kind of drink anywhere, I guess.
And thankfully, as a result, we don't have nearly the sort of violence that you see in England in terms of people going to sporting events, getting totally tanked, and you get these riots, you get these fights, you get all this looting and stuff out on the streets because they have had too much to drink and forgotten how to behave.
And the supermarkets don't even sell alcohol here, which blew my mind when I arrived. Like, forget popping to Sainsbury's and getting your bits for dinner where you get a bottle of wine and some nibbles. You actually have to go to the supermarket to get your food and then an actual licensed booze place to get your wine, which is kind of bizarre to me, but yeah, it's just the norm here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that New South Wales was like Victoria and that supermarkets could sell alcohol, in that if you go to Aldi, they have the alcohol section. I know that Australia-wide, Woolies and Coles don't do that because they've got that other chain that's connected with them, and it works for them, I guess, to have it right next to it. But you hear this so often from Brits, but at the end of the day, you're walking out one door and walking in another door immediately. The local Coles here, you don't even have to do that. There's just like pretty much an archway. You go through the checkout, you go through the archway, pick up your alcohol and then head out the door. So I don't know why it seems like such a big drama. Although she doesn't make it sound like a drama, she's just questioning it. But to that I say, if you're in New South Wales, can't you go to Aldi? I know you can't in Queensland, and I think it's South Australia, possibly also Western Australia. But in Victoria you can. As far as I know, Canberra you can, and I thought that Sydney was New South Wales was the same.
And if you do miss that cosy pub banter and vibe that I think a lot of British people do when they move here, do not worry, because although the pubs might not be the perfect places for those, you can get that feeling, I think, in kind of cute little wine bars instead. And in the area that I'm in Newtown, there are loads of those around and they are so lovely to hang out in. But they're not quite the same as a pub, but they're a good replacement, I'd say.
My dad used to live in Newtown about 40-something years ago, before moving to the Blue Mountains. But it's my understanding that Newtown is now a bit of an upmarket kind of area. Wine bars even sounds upmarket, doesn't it? So I'm guessing it's very different from pub culture. And it's probably something that is more your younger generation and more of a city thing. I know we certainly don't have anything like that in Bendigo. I wouldn't know if there's anything like that in Melbourne because, like I said, it's just not my kind of culture anymore.
Next, let's talk about pet culture. Australians love their dogs, with 48% of households actually owning dogs here. And it shows, with dogs literally appearing in every aspect of Aussie culture, from park runs to dog shows, dog racing, dog influencers. I've even seen places advertising doggy food on their brunch menu. And there's a thing here called Doglato, which is like a doggy gelato.
Why did you set this up?
Well, just for the love of dogs.
But here's the twist. There are tons of strict laws in Sydney, at least, and I think the other cities in Australia. I'm not 100% certain on outside of the cities, but lots of strict laws about what you can do with your dog and where they can go. Local council regulations in lots of coastal areas are really strict on what times you can walk your dog on the beach leash off, or if you can even walk it on the beach full stop. And there are lots of rules around public transport and which ones you can bring your dog on, and if you can, you need to have it in a carrier, which is kind of difficult for any medium or large dogs. It's so different to the UK, where you will just be sitting on the tube and literally someone just pops on with a dog. Even national parks here are off limits to dogs, so you can't take your dog for a walk to the national park, as they want to protect the Australian wildlife in them, which, makes a lot of sense. But the good news is that if you're a dog lover or thinking about coming here and getting a dog, the dog communities are huge here. And I think it's a really good way to meet new people by joining dog clubs, even bringing your dog for your park runs, or just chatting to other dog owners in parks when you do take your dog for a walk.
I feel that some places are going backwards in terms of dog tolerance. So apparently here in Bendigo, you're not even allowed to have your dogs off lead, just walking down the street anymore, which is crazy because I've had several dogs in the past who I never had to put on a lead because they would just basically walk along. They stayed out of trouble. They ignored other dogs. One of those dogs, you couldn't get a collar on him because he had issues. So that would exclude those dogs from being able to just wander down the street when, chances are, in a suburb like mine, I could take my dogs for a walk up and down the street and it would be only a small chance of me running into one of the other local dogs. There's maybe a few houses that I would choose not to go past if my dogs weren't on a lead, just because of the dogs in the front yard that are aggressive. But other than that, it shouldn't be an issue. I think too many places now are becoming restrictive of allowing dogs, but at the same time, it's going two ways because you can sit outside a cafe these days with your dog. I could go up to Echuca and go on one of the paddle steamers and my dog could come with me. But then at the same time, there's a lot of parks around here where they don't allow dogs. I think Tasmania has the best dog culture. I find that people in Tasmania know how to socialise their dogs better than people in Victoria and New South Wales. And that comes from doing a rather lengthy road trip right up through to Byron Bay and back. There's a few spots, if you go to a dedicated off-lead beach, chances are many of the people there are regulars and their dogs are well socialised. But I know if I take my dogs to the local lake here, and even with them being on a lead, I can't let them attempt to socialise with other dogs because these other dogs, even on leads, have not been taught how to socialise with other dogs, which for my Kelpie Lab Cross is something that she just has not adapted to since coming to Victoria. Living in Tasmania, there were a number of off-lead places that I used to take my dogs, and my dogs got to know the regulars. And you'd rock up there and you'd let them off lead and they'd go over and they'd say hello to their friends. And even if people were just walking through, coming back from a walk and they had their dogs off on a lead, they would be quite happy for their dogs to chat with your dog. Here, if your dog even looks at another person's dog, there's a chance you're going to be yelled at for it, which is just ridiculous. So I think we need to rethink our dog culture. I do have to agree with her on this aspect.
Next up, sports culture. The sports culture is so different here.
That, unfortunately, is the third time this evening.
Football matches in particular, I think, can be quite pricey, and their crowds can often be kind of intimidating, at least to a non-sports fan like myself. If you lived in the UK and you've seen a football crowd walking past, you know what I mean. Tickets the Premier League can cost an absolute fortune. I don't even want to think about how expensive season tickets can be, and I think going can often be more of a treat occurrence than a frequent casual one. In Australia, I found that the sports culture has a lot more relaxed and chill vibe to it, and definitely comes across as more family friendly. Plus, tickets are way cheaper. For example, in Melbourne, tickets for the AFL at the MCG Stadium cost $27 for an adult, which is about the same as £13.50 in the UK. And for kids under 14, it's literally $5. Like, that wouldn't even buy you a chocolate bar in the UK. And same for other sports. So I've been going to quite a few cricket matches to watch the BBL recently. The season just finished, but I went to see maybe 3 matches in total. And yeah, you get the few odd twats, like shouting out rude things. But in general, it feels like the crowds are much more civilised and family friendly. So if you love sport, I'm sure you will love Australia. If you want to see more AFL, cricket, tennis, rugby, you name it, I think it's much more affordable and something you can actually do more of here.
Okay, first of all, I'll apologise. It's playtime. The pup wants the other dogs to play with him. They're not interested. I've not actually been to any Australian sports games. I've been to state level footy games where people I know have been playing and I've gone to support them in like finals or grand finals. But in terms of like AFL or cricket or anything like that, I've not been. I had no idea the prices were actually that cheap, which explains the huge crowds. I must admit, I will say I've been to V8 supercars and I love that, but that's not quite as affordable as what she's saying here in terms of these particular sports. Definitely we are far better behaved in Australia than what you hear about sports in the UK. And I think that goes back to what she was saying about drinking in public. We have strict laws, so people going to like an AFL game aren't getting tanked like people going to a footy game in the UK.
Next up, and this is one I have heard quite a few people talking about, which is the morning culture here versus evening culture of the UK. In the UK, I think we have quite a good evening culture. Like, it's nowhere good as Europe, where people literally go out for dinner at 9 or 10 p.m, but, it's still pretty decent. And there are always places open super late or even 24 hours. Like, think of those late night runs to the 24/7 Tesco's where you're at a party and you run out of mixer and you need to run out and grab some. So handy. As well as Australia being on the opposite side of the world, it seems that their morning evening culture is also upside down. Cafes and coffee shops literally open at the crack of dawn and close so early, with my local one closing as early as midday, which is really annoying, and I get there too late so many days. But a lot of the others even close at 2, 3 or latest 4 p.m. Yeah, so there are none of those 6 p.m. cafes, which sucks if you like to work in a cafe in the afternoon. Trust me, I've looked. There just don't seem to be any of them at all. And I think maybe it's quite a European thing for coffee shops to be open till 5, 6. But here it seems there's literally no demand or desire for a latte at 5, 6 p.m. So the places just aren't open till those times. On the brighter side, if you've ever wanted the opportunity to become a morning bird, this could be the perfect time. I was a morning bird anyway, so this way of things actually kind of suits me a little bit better because I like getting up early and I'm weird like that. Just my brain works. But if you're an evening bird and not looking to change, you may find this to be a little bit awkward.
Now, I've heard this mentioned before, which I find really surprising because I could name several places around Bendigo where you could go and sit with your laptop or your tablet or something in the afternoon and enjoy a latte while you work. I understand the difference between morning culture and evening culture when you look at Australia versus the UK, because in the UK it's a lot like Tassie, whereas, for 10 months of the year it's probably too bloody cold of a morning to go and sit down in a cafe and have a coffee at 7 o'clock in the morning. You're probably doing your best just to stay warm and get organised and head out to work. I know when I was living in Tassie, there's no way I would have been stopping to sit at a cafe at 7 o'clock in the morning. Whereas other states, New South Wales, Queensland, even areas of Victoria, most of the year you can sit and enjoy a coffee fairly early in the morning without freezing your butt off. In terms of what she's saying about places closing early, I really find that surprising. I mean, I look at Victoria and we have Beechworth bakeries all around the place. They're 12 hours, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you're going to see people in there any time of day with laptops or tablets and sitting nursing a cappuccino or having a snack while they're at it. I mean, surely if your local cafe and it's a little cafe and it closes at lunchtime, surely there's got to be a bigger cafe or a bakery nearby that you can go to instead. I will say that she mentions that she lives in Newtown. That's probably more of your higher socioeconomic status type area, meaning that probably a lot of people maybe do that morning culture of grabbing a coffee before work. But if you are in a high paid job, probably comes with a lot of hours, a lot of responsibility, and chances are there just isn't an afternoon market for cafes in a place like that where you have, more of your professionals living in the area. Most professionals at the end of the day just want to go home and relax and are not going to be hanging out in a cafe. So maybe that's why in that particular area there isn't a cafe culture. I'm not familiar enough with Sydney to know if there's any universities near Newtown, because I would imagine that in areas closer to universities you probably would have more of that afternoon cafe culture also.
Gambling and VIP lounges, and I've mentioned a little bit already on Australia's big gambling culture, but I'm about to dive into it more. In the UK, it's not unusual to place a cheeky bet at the Grand National, and as a kid, I remember so fondly going to Brighton Pier and using their machines in the arcade, like the 1p and 2p machines. Oh, they were so fun, and all you'd get is, after maybe about £5 worth of 1p or 2p's, this shitty little toy which probably costs like 20p to make in China. In Australia, gambling culture is not only really highly normalised, but it's actually quite a big issue. Turns out that Australians lose $25 billion on legal forms of gambling each year, which is the largest per capita losses in the world. And if you're not used to the gambling culture here, it can be quite a shock to see gambling pokie machines literally everywhere. Bars, clubs, pubs, hotels, literally, like, these things are just everywhere. Plus, you get ads at a lot of the sporting events, like even at the cricket, on TV and the radio, which we do get a little bit in the UK, but like nowhere near to the same level. And
there definitely is a great deal of normalisation when it comes to betting in Australia. And I think one of the things they should be addressing is online advertising. I see so often when I'm watching something on YouTube and there'll be gambling ads come up. And sure, at the end of the ad, there's now that disclaimer thing, gambling, what does it cost you, or whatever that. But I think given that it is recognised as being a problem in Australia, that there should be limitations on advertising gambling in Australia. I also think that pokies have become way too accessible in the last 40 something years. You know, it used to be that you had to go to an actual casino if you wanted to have a go on the pokies. And, you know, how many of us remember when we were 18 and we'd go to the casino for a night out because, you know, we were finally old enough to do so. And you'd have your $10 worth of coins and you'd lose them and be like, okay, I'm done. It wasn't so easy to access. Whereas, you know, she's so right. There are so many places now, so many pubs where you can go, or bars, where they have a gambling license and they have an entire room full of pokies. So, yeah, I can see what she's saying. It is surprising seeing those statistics, though, that's for sure.
The mysterious VIP lounges, as I call them. So when I came to Australia a couple of years ago, there were all these big glowing golden VIP lounge signs on the high street, kind of pointing into pubs or like downstairs little like lounges, and I was so confused at what these VIP lounges were. I was like, is it like some kind of strip club? I didn't know what they were. Turns out they're just a really over glamorized way of promoting gaming lounges. And due to the big gambling problem here, New South Wales actually banned these signs outside of venues from September 2023 to cut down on this over-glamorization and promotion of gaming lounges on the streets, particularly to families and children who are walking by, just to limit this gambling exposure to, you know, all sorts of communities. If you love gambling, Australia will be the perfect place for you, but if not, if you're not used to gambling being advertised everywhere, like in the UK, then it can be a little bit jarring.
Now, I have no idea if there are VIP lounges down in the CBD in Melbourne. I've never seen any, but then it's possible that I'm also just not looking for them because it's not a culture that I have any interest in. That said, my understanding of VIP lounges goes back to when I was in my teens, and West Point Casino had a VIP lounge off their gaming room. And you didn't get in there unless you were someone important, basically, someone with a bucket load of money. So it was mostly just businessmen with a lot of money to throw around, a lot of money to lose. You know, they'd put massive bets. I don't even know what they bet on in there. It was all sort of very hush-hush, all secret. You know, you didn't get in there unless you were someone important. The only observation I have from that is that as a 17-year-old whose best friend's father happened to spend a lot of money in the VIP room, it was really convenient for us as underage teenagers because we never got asked for ID anywhere in the casino, meaning that all the little bars and everything like that, no one questioned us. It was like they knew who my friend was, so I was with her, we were good. The only time I ever got asked for ID was when I was there with another best friend. We were both thankfully 18 at that point in time, and she has a very young sounding voice. We were both a little over 5 foot tall, still are, just a little over 5 foot tall, and because of that we got asked for ID. Slight segue there, but you know, I do these things. So I don't know if these VIP lounges in New South Wales are like that, and you're expected to bet big and have lots of money in the first place, or if they're just another name for a gambling lounge there. But yeah, it definitely is something that to me sounds odd in terms of just being able to walk in off the street. And it's a good thing to know that they have got regulations in place.
At first. And lastly, car culture and driving. If you think you've seen some pretty big cars in the UK, I'm telling you now, it is nothing compared to what you'll see here.
Absolute weapon of a tow vehicle.
Gone are the cute little minis, the Fiats, the cute little city cars, and instead big 4x4s and utes dominate the roads. And on top of that, the drivers are definitely notably more aggressive. So looking at the top selling cars in Australia for 2024, you'll see that SUVs and utes dominate the list. Not only are the cars bigger, but so is the road rage and aggression. In a recent road rage survey, the statistics showed that men in particular between 18 and 34 were the biggest culprits when it came to road rage and aggression. And I've experienced this aggression on the roads myself when driving with my family, where we have, probably because we come from the UK, we have like a tiny little city chilled car, and on the city roads we'll sometimes get a huge big 4x4 driving right up our arses behind us because we're bang on the speed limit, and they're getting annoyed at us just because, oh, I don't know, we're not going above the speed limit, they're in a rush, but you get like a lot of honking, a lot of people driving up really close behind you. Yeah, it's just definitely a different car culture here. It makes me realise how kind of weirdly polite and civilised the UK culture is, which is just so bizarre.
Okay, it gets me frustrated every time someone talks about Australian car culture when they're a Sydney sider. I don't enjoy driving in Sydney. I find Sydney drivers to be the most aggressive drivers in Australia. I probably can't speak for South Australia and Western Australia, but definitely from driving Tassie, Victoria, Queensland, Canberra, New South Wales or Sydney drivers really stand out. Not a pleasant place to drive. So I think it's a little bit unfair to basically judge us all by that standard. I know, I'll be honest, there's a lot of really aggressive drivers in Tasmania. I was quite surprised by how much more polite Victorian drivers were. But that said, since COVID, even Victorian drivers are starting to, or several are turning into major a-holes. I have found that it feels different now driving down Melbourne Way than it did before COVID. I think even Victorian drivers have become more aggressive. So maybe, I don't know what what UK drivers are like. Maybe she's got a point there. But it does make me a little bit frazzled when I know that she is referring specifically to Sydney drivers. And, well, if Sydney drivers are worse than they were 8 years ago, heck, I wouldn't even go anywhere near Sydney in a car now. As for car sizes, we do have bigger roads and cheaper fuel, so that's not really surprising, is it?
When you think about it, big cars aren't all that bad. Like, it really does make sense why they have so many here, with there being a lot more rougher terrain, a lot more scenic routes, a lot more road trip culture. In general, Australia is just geared more towards driving than public transport, because the trains here connecting places long distance are pretty shit.
I think we have an okay train network here in Victoria. I can't speak knowledgeably on the train network in New South Wales, but I have heard that there are issues. In terms of the train network here in Victoria, I think my frustration is that if I wanted to go to Sydney, I would either have to drive up to Albury, which is a few hours north, or drive or train down to Melbourne first, which is a few hours south. and then catch a train to go to Sydney. Personally, I enjoy driving, so if I was doing Sydney and I had the time, I would probably do it as a road trip. But I would probably stay somewhere outside of like the main business area and rely on public transport to get to and from. That said, last time my sister went there, she said it was quite expensive for the train rides. So I would have liked to have heard a comparison from her in terms of trains in the UK versus at least New South Wales trains for cost. Of course, the other bugbear in Victoria is there's no trains that go to the airport. We have a shuttle bus that goes here from Bendigo, but to be honest, by the time you pay the cost, if you're only going to be gone for so many days, it's just as cheap and far more convenient just to drive yourself down and park in the long-term parking.
To Australia, particularly from the UK, can definitely feel you've entered some weird parallel universe when you arrive, with the different laws, the different social norms, and the different ways of having fun.
I've skipped her outro because, you know, you're going to hear my outro anyway, and there's no additional information being added there. I think this was interesting, especially listening to her take on gambling culture, that it was almost confronting from the way she was speaking, so that's a bit interesting. Sporting culture, that makes sense to me. It sounds like she's quite enjoying being in Australia in terms of going to sports, going to wine bars, etc. It's a different perspective from the slightly older couples that we've listened to. So it is interesting to hear the perspective from someone who's a little bit younger and still doing all that socialising, going to wine bars, etc., to see how that affects her. So on that note, yeah, thank you, Mouse. Honestly, chihuahuas, who'd have them? That's the culprit right there in the back of the picture. He is very cute, he's very sweet, but when he wants someone to play with him and no one's interested, he can become a bit of a mouth. So on that note, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this video. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.